My name's Beth and I'm an addict. And I've got quite a long time to speak, I feel. So I might end up finishing a little bit early. I'm going to start, unless I'm not very good at doing like experience, strength and hope talks, like your story. Like Jim said, oh, my story, blah, blah. But I'm much better at talking about like traditions or steps. I don't enjoy talking about my story that much, just because I've heard it like loads of times. But you know, when I first came to a 12-step meeting, I didn't come through rehab, I didn't come through social services or any government agencies, because I had a family that actively avoided government agencies. You know, we lived on the edges of society and communes, on like traveller sites, and you know, sold drugs and did parties and all that sort of thing. So when things got bad for me, the last thing I was ever going to do was walk into like social services or a detox centre and go, I've got a drug problem, you know, because I'd bring it on top for me and I'd bring it on top for all my family, and you know, I'd get my daughter taken off me and all of that sort of stuff. I used to think that people who are on methadone, like they were tracked by the government, like junkies are that important. You know, I had like a head full of all these like conspiracy theories about, you know, what went on. And you know, and as it turns out, you know, maybe I didn't need to have that. I didn't need to have that experience. Other things worked for me and put me into a place where I was receptive to, you know, and I always say this because it's my truth, is I literally thought that people that met in like community centres and church halls were like total losers that just didn't have the willpower to get drug money and to take drugs anymore, and they just couldn't survive on the street anymore. So I just thought they were just total losers, you know, and they're the sort of people that, you know, oh, so-and-so used to come down onto like the front line or be in the crack house, and then suddenly they disappear because they're lightweights and they can't cope, yeah? That's what I thought. And I also thought that police informers came here because I didn't understand why you would sit and tell people you had a drug problem. If I got arrested and went to the police station, I would never, like now, people are like, I want to see the nurse after like half an hour of being in a police cell. Yeah, oh, I've got a drug problem, I need some drugs. I would never do that. I would sit there, be sick, and wait until it was time to walk out the door and then go and score. You know, it's like quite a different mentality to nowadays. It's a lot more socially normal for people to have drug problems, yeah? And also I thought everyone in here was like God Squad, because when we were kids, we lived on, like I said, like hippie traveller festivals, like big free festivals, and we'd go there early and set up, and we'd all have our trucks and our buses and all this type of thing, big marquees, sound systems, and we'd get there early, and then all the punters, the people that want to buy social, recreational drugs, would turn up and party and buy drugs off us, and then they would go totally fucked, hopefully, that was the idea. And the people, these Jesus Army people used to come to the festivals in a big Jesus bus with Jesus will save you and a banner on the side. And like when all the acid casualties had had too much acid and they couldn't cope anymore, and they were sat like in their little blanket, space cadet blankets, the Jesus people would come and try and pray and make them better and stuff. And when we were kids, we'd go on the bus and they'd always have like sweets, cakes, hot chocolate, stuff like that. And then they'd try and talk about Jesus, and we'd just eat the food and go. I thought they were mad, yeah? And that was my only perception of like, really, of religion. And I really thought that this 12-step thing was about God. And it was all contempt prior to investigation. That's all it was. And I never associated with anyone that got well. Because, you know, when people get well, by default, they disappear. You know, people didn't come back to the crack house and do the amazing... Well, did they? Yeah, one person did try to 12-step me over a crack pipe. But he seriously did. But, you know, I just asked her to shut up and just carry on smoking. Because it was insane. Like her son was in the room playing PlayStation. I'd just given birth to my daughter. I used to go to her house to smoke crack to get away from my husband, so I could smoke crack away from him. And every time we smoked crack together, we'd end up arguing, and accusing each other of stealing each other's stuff. Yeah, it was just the real toxic relationship. Like I was so overdoing that with my husband, I found a woman that I could go and have a real toxic relationship with. And she did that thing that people do when they smoke crack, where they hold their breath for like 5 minutes. And so the sentence of like, you should go to rehab, I went there once, you've got a daughter now, it would be a really good time to go to rehab, that should only take 10 seconds. It took her about 2 minutes. And I was just like, yeah, I'm not going there. Obviously, it doesn't work. Look at you. So someone did try to help me, I suppose, once. But it wasn't very attractive to me, you know. So now, my home group, where I go, and I can't even believe, you know, sometimes that this is how I live, you know, it's quite orderly. It's a 12 and 12 meeting. There's a lot of sponsorship there. It's not like a dictatorial home group. You know, we have a lot of laughter and a lot of fun there, but it's very obvious for anyone that comes in the room, not necessarily people from rehab, because it's part of the structure for people in rehab, but someone brand new that comes in off the street. We know when we're ready to find that person that comes in off the street so that we can be around them. Because in England, you don't just get in rehab. People just die on the street. You can't ring up and go, I want to go to detox. They're like, yeah, great chat, bye, you can wait. All our money's gone, you know. So a lot of people, once they've had rehab once, that's it. It's like one strike, you're out. You're not getting any more funding. So it's really important that we have quite healthy meetings. Like the fellowship where I am, that they really, if people want to detox, someone will find somewhere for them to stay, and they can do that, go through that process through the rooms, because they don't have the luxury of treatment and just like being taken away from society, you know, to the insane asylum. So that doesn't happen for a lot of the guys that are in my town. But fortunately for me, the first meeting that I went to, because I was bored, I went to a 12-step meeting not to find God, not to find any friends, because I knew that you were all losers. I was bored. I'd left the city, crack house, front line, fighting every day, police kicking the door off, that life. My dad came out of prison and sort of like tried to treat my physical addiction, which I thought it was just a physical problem. I was just addicted to heroin and smoked a lot of crack, because I thought that crack was just psychologically addictive and you can stop it at any point, it's fine. And I believed that. When someone told me there was Cocaine Anonymous, I laughed. I thought, what? Why? It's not really addictive. Honestly, when I think about some of the things that I thought and said in meetings in early days, it does make me cringe a little bit. A guy said that he was a marijuana addict, and I laughed like out loud, and I was looking around going, he said he's a marijuana addict. What? Like, smoking pot is normal, like, it's just normal behaviour. So the reason that I went to the meeting was because everything was fixed externally. I was no longer in a crack house. I had lovely clothes, lovely place to live, lovely boyfriend that was going to fix me. Everything should be sweet. But something inside me was so broken still that I thought, I fucking hate it here. I hate this life. I thought money was my problem, but I had all this money. And I just wanted to go back to the crack house, to the front line, where I knew how to be, you know, because I was used to that life. And I'd surrendered to my addiction. I decided not to do any more detoxes. I was sick of doing detoxes. I was sick of doing a detox, getting all my life together, and then 3 months later being baffled why I couldn't just have one. And, you know, fortunately, after a little bit of resistance on my part, I got a sponsor that took me through the steps, and I found out what I suffer from. But that night that I went to the meeting, literally, if I hadn't, my husband was with a nurse at the time. He came round to see me at my boyfriend's place, and he was a total loser. Like, he was going to go to prison. He was on a methadone script, and he got together with a nurse that was going to look after him. I clearly had no intentions of looking after him. And so he used to come round and, like, he would enable me to just, like, I would just socially use crack and heroin at the weekend. I thought I was clean, yeah? And then I would, for the first time, I like started drinking alcohol, having a few pills, smoking skunk weed. So I knew I'd solved my drug problem. I just didn't understand why I felt the call of the crack house and the insanity, and I just wanted to go back. I really wanted to go back. And he'd left this where to find, and I thought, I'm really bored here. Maybe I'll go to the meeting for a bit of entertainment, because this is dull as ditch water. It's like watching paint dry. I went to the meeting, and it wasn't like my home group. It wasn't like this meeting is tonight. There wasn't like clear... It wasn't so clear what the whole programme was about, but it was the right meeting for me. I went in, and there was a couple having a domestic on the stairs. And I thought, oh, maybe these people aren't that boring and such losers. And then I went in, and no one really spoke to me except for a couple of guys that wanted to help me, which I was very receptive to, because I don't remember any of the women that were at that meeting at all. And yeah, there was like lots of like people in the malady and in the problem, basically, and that was exactly what I needed to hear on that evening. You know, what I needed to hear. It must have been like May the 6th, 1999. I didn't need to hear all about God and the spiritual solution and get a sponsor and work the steps and you can recover and you never need to use again. I'd have been like, no, I just want to detox. Leave me alone. You know, I really wasn't ready for all of that. That was a bit much. At that time, I didn't really understand what I suffer from. So if someone had said to me, you've got to do the steps and do service and do all this stuff, I'd have been like, hey, that's a bit intense. You need to calm down. No one had explained to me that I was going to die. You know, no one had made it clear to me that if I was an alcoholic, a true alcoholic, the chronic variety, I was going to die. And if I was lucky, I'd die quickly. And if I was unlucky, it would be a slow, prolonged, miserable death. And eventually I was going to end up like a lot of the people that I used with, like, I don't know, do you have front lines? Like neighbourhoods where it's just all crime and the police don't go there and stuff? Yeah. So that was my home. That's my little territory. And that people just lose their minds. They just die. They just die in the crack house and they just slowly unravel. You know, it's an animal sort of existence. And really, if I was lucky, then it would have been quick. Yeah, what happened was, and this is all on reflection, because at the time you've got to remember, I thought I was clean, but I'd smoked skunk weed all day, drunk all these Bacardi breezes, which are like these early Alco Pops, because I didn't like alcohol. And I like rattled when I walked because I had like all these pills in my pockets. I did this thing, it's like obsessively counting pills. And I genuinely thought I was clean, yeah, from class A's, yeah, because that is my problem. And all these nut jobs without a step between them, you know, on step none, as Jim always says. As soon as like the secretary person sat down, it all just went quiet. And they all just sat there, you know. I don't know about you, but that's never happened to me in a crack house, yeah? So I was a little bit stunned by this moment of discipline and hush. And, you know, I sort of bought into the whole, like, oh, okay, you know, we're all going to be quiet now and they're going to do these readings. And obviously I was doing like a quick assessment of everyone in the room. Rich, poor, old, young, loser, nut job, you know, like you do when you go into any new place. So I did a quick assessment of everyone in the room and decided who was probably worth getting to know and who wasn't. It was all the men, it was all the loaded ones. That was it, assessment done. And then I proceeded to share, because I discovered that I don't mind being the centre of attention, about how my family had completely fucked my life up, and it was all their fault, because obviously it was. And if it wasn't my family's fault, it was society's fault, obviously, because none of it was my fault. And, you know, because my family all used drugs, it sounded quite plausible as it was coming out of my mouth. And afterwards I felt much relieved, and I thought, oh, I'll go back to those meetings again so I can talk all about me and my poor life and how it's ended up for me. Oh, woe is Beth, the poor victim in it all, I'm sure. And I was sold on talking about myself in meetings. That's great. So what happened the next day was that a kindly chap took me out for coffee to tell me about the 12 steps. How do you like that? And we went out for coffee after this lunchtime meeting, and he told me about abstinence. And it was the first time I'd contemplated this word. I honestly don't think I knew what it meant until he said it. And it struck a chord with me that abstinence was something that I had tried before. I'd sworn off everything before. You know, some of you guys that have heard my story before, I tried all sorts of things to get away from the problem. I thought the problem was the drugs. I went to that meeting because the problem was the drugs. It's never really been me. It's circumstances. It's lack of money. It's because A, B, and C happened. It's because so-and-so's a dickhead. Yeah? You know, it's always someone else's fault. So I still was convinced that it was just the drugs that was the problem, right? And in the past, I tried to, like, swear off on my own willpower, and I've got really good willpower. You know, I swore off, and I got obsessively into, like, being in the circus. I was young, so it was quite quick for me to make the transition to being a circus performer from being, like, a heroin addict. You know, and I did that for a while, and one day, the idea came to me that I was in a certain town, city, where I'd used drugs before, and I thought, I'll just treat myself. Because I still thought that drugs was my treat, it was my reward. You know, really, it was still my God. You know, the times in between was just a little break from being with what I really wanted. That was my true love. You know, the most intimate and intense relationship I've ever had in my life before I came to the programme was with drugs. So why would I suddenly think that I want to come to some meetings, get a sponsor and let go of that? It served me so well for so long. And you know, my experience was that I could only do a certain amount of time without drugs, without feeling like there was something missing, you know? So abstinence, when he said it, I thought, yeah, I tried that before. So I suppose, insanely, I thought, I'll try abstinence again. You know, I didn't realise that what had to follow was a rigorous course of action, i.e. taking the 12 steps. I don't think he was thinking of taking me through the 12 steps. But, you know, that's okay. He planted the seed, you know, this thing about abstinence. And I went to a meeting that evening, and the next day was my first day clean and sober. And that was May the 8th, 1999. And I haven't used a drink or a drug since then, you know. And it's absolutely nothing to do with me. Like, the more that I reflect on my journey in the steps and in the programme, the more I know there is a God, you know, and the more that I know that God's always been working in my life. It's just that I've always looked for God in external things. You know, I always want it to be tangible. I always want to be in control of it. And that was my story, really, when I started through the steps, the journey through the steps. If I'd really known how big and how powerful and how much it was going to change me back then, to comprehend where I was going to be now, I'd be like, fuck that. That sounds I don't need to do all that. You know, it is a bit much. It's a big deal. You know, I just wanted to do a detox and stay stopped. But all of this, like, rearrangement of the personality and doing service and helping people and all that sort of stuff, it just all sounds a little bit cringe, you know. I think I'd lost the ability to be happy for people, really, because I was so unhappy with myself. If anyone came to me and they were happy and that, like, their life was whole and they'd got their life back together, I couldn't really be happy for them, you know. I was quite bitter and insular, you know, and so to try and think from having that sort of mentality to where I am now, I just wouldn't have been able to comprehend it. And I'm really glad that it happened for me in, like, a slow way. So I went to meetings for a while, and I stayed abstinent, and God's really had my back all the way. And I always say this: I really am spiritually retarded. I really don't get stuff. Stuff doesn't just, like. I'm quite hung up on hypocrisy. I was brought up with a lot of hippies that did a lot of drugs, but they also did a lot of meditation, right? And they used to, like, drift around the place and, like, all be, like, really spiritual and stuff. and all love each other so much. And I'm the sort of mind that I always look for the flaws in people. Yeah? It's like I've got a preset to looking for the faults in people, you know, and looking for what's wrong, you know, rather than, you know, the strengths in people. And any little bit of hypocrisy, if I can catch anybody out on a lie, or they're not genuine, or they're not sincere, I'll hold on to that, you know, rather than looking for what's good and looking for the beauty in things. It seems like that's my preset position. And so when people talk about spirituality and like God, and they're all like gushy and like, oh wow, and I had this amazing experience. Honestly, still now sometimes I do cringe. But when I'm one-on-one, working with someone, or I'm with someone, one-on-one, I'm much more comfortable with it because I can feel like it's genuine. It comes from the heart then. But like big group, mutual appreciation, yay, happy clappy stuff, it's never going to really be my thing, I don't think. And that's so cool that I'm in a 12-step program, because it doesn't demand of me that I believe anyone else's idea of God. It doesn't demand that I go and like do satsang or go to church on Sunday, you know. And in the same breath, I can tell you that I sponsor Muslim women. Like my sponsor is Jewish agnostic. Her sponsor is an atheist. It's like, this is the coolest place I could have ever landed, you know, because everything belongs here. And anyone with the peculiar mental twist that I have can fit in here. You know, they can find their place. So I suppose I'll tell you how I ended up getting a sponsor. And I suppose, you know, I didn't really want to ask anyone to sponsor me. In the town that I come from, it's like a woman doesn't have a man sponsor. And that's just not how it rolls. It's women for women. And I know that's different everywhere. You know, and I know in some places there aren't any women to sponsor women, so that, you know, you've got to go through the work with a woman. I don't know why that is. It's just maybe there's a lot of strong sponsorship now, and that's how it is. Like, usually women go with women, regardless of their sexual orientation, whatever. And how it was explained to me by my sponsor, you know, was that, you know, she was going to teach me how to be a woman. Because until I went through the steps with her, I didn't really know. I had a child, and I just had another child. I didn't know anything about being a mother. I'd not connected emotionally, like, with that, you know. I could do, like, robot mum stuff while my daughter was in the house, but I didn't really know what a mother was. And to be a daughter, and to be a sister, you know, all of that stuff was just, like, something over there. You know, I just did the words. I said the words that you wanted to hear to get what I wanted, yeah, to keep you sweet. That's what I did. It was all just, like, some big show, you know. And through the process of doing the steps with her, and specifically my fifth step, sharing my fifth step, I can honestly tell you that's the first time I've told one person in one place, in one time, everything about myself. How fucking sad is that? 28 years old, man. And I'd never told my whole truth. I'd never laid myself bare in front of anyone. Obviously, I'd laid myself bare. But at 28, that would be a bit sad. No, but you know what I'm saying. At least twice. Yeah, twice. That's what I tell my kids. No, I just think that's so fucked up. You know, there's me, Mrs. like catch you out because you're all ingenuine, you're all fucking liars, you're all dishonest, you're all hypocrites. It's all fucked up anyway, yeah? It's like calling everyone on their bullshit, and I'm just the number one bullshitter. Like, even when I'm telling you the truth, I'm only telling you that bit of the truth, and then I'll go and tell someone else this bit of the truth that you'll be good with, you know, and that you'll co-sign. That's just how I rolled, naturally, like this little chameleon, yeah? So how am I going to know myself? How am I going to know how to be a mum? How am I going to know how to be a wife? How am I going to know any of that stuff? I never practiced. It was never important. I knew what I served, and it was drugs. You know, it was the only thing that ever made me content. It was the only thing that ever gave me peace. You know, I don't remember ever feeling as much peace as I did when I first had some heroin. And I never felt so happy as when I first had that crack pipe and my ears were ringing and I was like, yay. Now I know why I was born. Because that's the effect it has on me. You know, I'm not wired like other people. You know, and I've watched a lot of people that can smoke crack like my dad, like a gentleman, you know? And it's so true. Given sufficient reason, he could stop. And that could be like the flimsiest reason, like it would upset my mum if we didn't go home. He would stop smoking crack. Like, who does that? You know? That's incomprehensibly stupid, yeah? Leave a house full of, like, cocaine that's ready to be freebased and drive 100 miles to see your gnaws of a wife, like, and leave the cocaine there. Like, who cares about her? Stay in the house. You know, obviously, I'm selfish, self-centred, self-seeking, frightened, and everything is all about me, left to my own devices. You know, and my stepfather just wasn't like that. He just didn't respond in the same way. He would enjoy it, and then it would be finished, and it would be like, time to go home. Great. So, yeah, I needed more than to stop using drinking drugs. Something needed to change in me. And the things that I'd used all my life to change how I felt weren't going to continue to work for me. So I did that process. And for me, in the book it says that, you know, we have to start working from the inside out. Yeah? It says something along those lines. I'm sure that Jim could quote it verbatim, but we're not going to ask him. For me, you know, there's many parts and many ways to work this program. And I had to do a lot of action and go through the steps very quickly. And if you say to me, oh, pray and everything will be okay, just pray every day, I'm going to be like, yeah, right, that's a flimsy read, you are mental. But if you say to me, take this pen, this paper, go and fill out all these columns this way, and then come back to me next week and read it out to me, I'm like, cool, I can work with that. Because it's practical, it's logical, it makes sense, yeah? So the way that I did the steps was a bit robotic. It was like, just give me the rules, I can do that, like paint by numbers, 12 steps, yeah? And then through just following the process exactly as it's in the book, I started to change, you know? And I didn't know that I changed until the reactions changed, till my relationships changed, until I felt a sense of ease and comfort without drinking drugs. And it all just snuck up on me, yeah? I'm quite high energy person. So I just kept really, really busy. I did like loads of service, loads of sponsorship, and wrote lists, and every single hour of my day was occupied with doing something, yeah? So it was through ordered activity that I got my recovery. Like some people, I've worked with some people, and they're just so like chill. And they just so get the God thing. It's like that drop, you know, that they say from the head to the heart, just happens for them so quickly. I'm not like on their case, you've got to write every day, you've got to do this, where's your discipline, blah, blah, blah. Because they've got this natural thing where they can just... And the beautiful thing about the 12 steps is it will meet you at your own level. If you're getting the clear-cut direction as it's written in the book, and you stick to that, around that, it will just work for you. You know, it's like any pure spiritual practice. You don't have to be a certain way before you get here for it to work for you. You don't have to have a certain sponsor for it to work for you. You just have to work with all the earnestness at your command. And if like me, that works out that you're just doing a lot. I did so much I was barely at home, you know, but I wasn't causing any harm at home, you know, because I was really, really occupied, yeah, you know, with cleaning, like a lot and stuff like that. And then over time I like thawed out. And sincerely, until I did that 4th and 5th step, I really did believe that the reason that I had no control over drinking drugs was because of my story. When it was explained to me, and I'm so glad that it was, that this program, you know, is about removing the obsession, and that can be forever. I was good with that. If someone had told me then that it could heal me from all the fucked up shit that had happened in my childhood as well, I'd have been like, yeah, right. Nothing can be that powerful. But actually, over time it has. And I tell you now, I'm not one of these people that sits in a meeting like crying over my childhood and, you know, I don't do that stuff. You know, I don't like that public emotion. I'm much better with other people that do it now. You know, when I first sat in a meeting and someone was crying, I was just like, oh my God, please just someone remove me from this place. I just get so awkward with emotion. And maybe that's one of the reasons that I wasn't meant to be in a rehab. Because if it had all been like sitting in group and getting in touch with your feeling stuff, like it sounds like seriously twisted stuff. And I don't want someone to be like pulling all that stuff out of me. The steps, like as I've gone through the steps and keep going through the steps and keep working with others, bit by bit, the healing happens, you know? So, for example, I mean, after I did my 4th and 5th step, I was given a 6 and 7 inventory to do, and it was really good that my sponsor knew me well enough to know that I had to keep writing, because a lot of people don't do any writing in 6 and 7. You know, they might just do what it says in the book. It's quite a short prayer. For me, it was quite important that I just kept she must have seen that I had no awareness or self-awareness whatsoever. So giving me like a list of defects would have been like, what? You know, all my defects had kept me alive, had kept me going long enough to get to my first 12-step meeting. I was reliant on those defects of character. Like the whole idea of having them all removed was terrifying, you know? Can you imagine having like all of your dishonesty just removed just like that? My God, it would be brutal. So, you know, I had some battles to do in my 6 and 7, but it was really good to do that inventory, and I had some moments of clarity that were really simple enough for an idiot like me, but deeply profound, that still I'm getting my head around, like how powerful the steps are. You know, when I'm doing my written inventory and stuff like that, and stuff comes up, I'm like, wow. You know, so if it can help someone as spiritually and emotionally retarded as me to have a good life, then seriously, it can help anyone, you know. Like I'll have conversations, especially in early recovery, with my earthling sister about conundrums that I would have. I'd be like, oh, I don't know what to do because this has happened at work and they've done this and done that. And she'd be like, why don't you just tell them the truth? And I'd be like, that's a really good idea. I'm going to do that. I'm going to tell them the truth. And it's like, I'm left to my own devices. I don't think like that, you know? I mean, obviously, over time, you know, it's become more of my natural state that I intuitively know how to handle the situations that used to baffle me. And, you know, those step 9 promises, they came true pretty quickly for me, you know? I'm very blessed. I got my daughter back, and I would say that the relationship with my daughter and my sister, I'm so grateful. I can't even put it into words. And my stepfather, the guy that came out of prison and came and got me out of the crack house because he thought I just had a physical dependency on heroin and I needed a little detox, bless him. You know, he died and he got to see me all those years clean and sober, you know, and he really got to know his daughter again, you know, and you know, that's priceless, right? And to go to his funeral, which was like a massive affair because he was like a real dude, with all his exes. There were so many ex-women there. It was great. Proper hippie affair, you know, to go to the funeral and for it not to be about me. Like, I made every family event about me. Like, when my dad came out of prison, he had a big coming out party. Like, everyone came from all over to, like, celebrate him coming out of jail. And I totally made everything about me, you know? It's just embarrassing, you know? But, yeah, to have that for him to die and to know that I was sweet and not have to worry at all about me. And for me to be a big sister to my little sisters, because I've got 3 brothers and 3 sisters, for me to be there when they needed me, that's novel. And for my daughter and my son, who's 19 and my daughter's 24, they don't even remember me smoking a cigarette. I mean, how does that shit happen? And I was in the place the other day. I did a talk at the place where we did the big book study. Yeah, the other place where you guys are. The treatment centre. And Jim said something about like the stories that we tell tell ourselves about his dad not going to play golf with him, which is proper posh problem, I'm telling you now. To have resentment over that. At least you went to school, mate. But when he said that, I remembered the thing that I used to tell myself for years and years was like, oh, how brutal it was. My family really fucked me up. My earliest memory is of lying in bed in a squat. Which is a house that isn't even my mum and dad's house. It's someone else's fucking house because they're so useless. And we're on a mattress on the floor. The police kick the door in. And then they take my dad away. That's like my first memory. That's a ticket to use drugs all your life. Right there, yeah? And blame everything on your family, right? It's like, yep, that's signed off, yeah? And I used to say to people, like, sometimes, you know, it's so fucked up, I would never do that to my kids. I would never do... That's awful, isn't it? You wouldn't do that to your kids. Like, so, you know, how hard did I have it? And when up until my daughter was 2.5, she lived with me in the ghetto on the front line, in a crack house where I was shotting drugs, like selling drugs from this place with like big barricades on the door. And every other day there was someone come to rob you or the police kick the door off. It was just like feral. It's not the place to have a little baby, right? And the police used to kick the door off all the time. And my daughter was there. And I didn't even remember that happened. I still used to like say, I would never do that to my kids. And I did it. I did it to my own kid. You know, this illness will have its way with you. You know, you have no power over the harm and the damage and the carnage you're going to cause when you're untreated. And for me, it is all about the relationships I have. You know, it's not about the stuff that I've got. I'm really good at getting stuff. I'll always find someone that can get me stuff. Get me a car, get me a flat, get me things, you know. And it was never about that, and I don't know why it took me so long to see that it's really about the relationship I have with myself, with God, and with the people that I love. And sincerely, my sponsor, she taught me that. Doing that 4th and 5th step with her, and then doing that 6 and 7 inventory, going on to make my amends, and sincerely make my amends with my family. The relationships that I have in my life have just flourished and bloomed, you know. I've caused no harms to my family. I've been a rock for them, you know. And, you know, I lost my mother last year as well. And she died of alcoholism. She liked to do drugs as well when she could. But she was just got too drunk to even do drugs. And it's really sad, you know, you don't get to carry the message to the people that you want to carry the message to. You can't just go, oh, yeah, I want you to have this. That's not how it works, right? And I always said to myself, one part of my amends was for selling a lot of drugs for a lot of years. It's like, how do you make up for that? You know, causing all those harms for all that time. You know, and some of the twisted shit, like selling people drugs that aren't drugs, like leaving someone ill and strung out and just walking off with money so that you can get your fix. All that sort of real nasty stuff that I told myself I would never be that person, but I did do that stuff. And when I wrote those harms down on my 8 list, you know, my sponsor suggested to me then and there that my amends was to carry the message in the fellowship, in Cocaine Anonymous, and to always be here to help the person that comes through the door that's suffering. And because a lot of my family have this illness, she told me then and there that it's never going to be, you're never going to have the power to decide when they get this, but you can have the door open for someone else's family member, and maybe by the grace of God, one of your family members will get the message through someone else, you know. And I stood by that, you know. Every single promise that I've made, I've kept it. How about that? That's not how I roll. So yeah, that's what I do, you know, and I don't do it because I'm selfless. I'm telling you now, this is the truth. If I have an hour out of the whole day of being awake where I'm not completely thinking about myself, that is a successful day in the life of Beth. Yeah? Because I am just so naturally self-absorbed. Like, anyone says something and it's like everything's self-referential. Like, you're saying something and how can I make that about me? Yeah? And the words might not come out of my mouth. You might not know that I'm thinking about myself, but I'm fucking thinking about myself again. Yeah? It's painfully twisted shit to be that absorbed with yourself. And, you know, that brings me on to like 10 and 11, really. When I saw the meditation thing, that was the thing that pissed me off the most about the steps, really. All the other things, once I'd got over the whole God thing, because it's a God of your own understanding, I could accept that. That's all good. And I was only going to do the 12 steps for 6 months, and if it didn't work, I was going to go back to using anyway. So, like, when it said prayer and meditation, I thought, sounds really pretentious, yeah? And I thought, and I'm not going to sit there like my parents used to do when they were doing their ashram things, with a blanket over my head, all quiet every morning, and do all that stuff. That's lame and boring. And I naturally can't sit still for very long, so it really freaked me out, the silence, the idea of silence. But fortunately for me, I was told that it was a journey and that I was to seek where religious and spiritual people were right. And I take this stuff really literally and seriously. So I've done loads of study. And a lot of my study was to prove that Christianity was totally wrong. And then through the process of trying to prove that Christianity was completely inaccurate, not only historically inaccurate, but all made up, I sort of found a lot of like inspiration in scripture and a lot of inspirational people that were part of Christianity and lots of other faiths as well. Like my parents had an Eastern like type guru, and they did a lot of meditation, and I do a lot of yoga. And you know, like the program, your prayer and meditation will meet you at your own level. It's way bigger than we can comprehend. So there's not any place that it can't get to us at, right? You know, you just have to be like open to it, and it will come and find you. You know, I just have to sit still for long enough to allow that power in, you know, and then I have that peace and serenity, you know, then I have that pause, then I have gravitas, you know, and I'm able to deal with situations like with some grace and some dignity and some respect. And that's a power greater than me working through me, you know, because naturally I rest satisfaction all the time. If I want something, you know, I'm on a mission, you know, to go and get that thing. I need to get it, you know. I set my course and I go and get it because no one else is going to do it for me. That's my experience. So the whole idea, like, it turns everything I understand on its head. You're just going to sit there and allow this power to come from inside you and to complete you. My dad would call that cosmic wind and misty piss. That sounds like weak shit for losers. He was a great guy. He really was. You know, and he lived in India, and his meditation was like going out on his bike and cycling, and he would just get into a pause, and, you know, and he would get his serenity there. You know, he used to say to me, how do you think that the people that live here and that work in the fields all day, do you think they have like an hour every morning? So they've got 6 kids to raise, and they have to work 12 hours a day. Do you think they sit there and do like all their joysticks and have that special quiet time for themselves? You know, it gets a bit like supermarket spirituality. You know, that whole thing of like, you know, you've bought it and you've got the logo and that makes you spiritual. And I really shy away from that stuff. And so I've done a lot of research, and I found stuff that works for me. You know, I do reflective writing, because I found that there's no point lying in writing. I can lie in my own head. I can lie out of my mouth. I'm quite good at that still. It's quite a skill I have. I haven't lost it. I don't use it very often, but, you know, I haven't lost it. But when you're writing and you put pen to paper, are you really going to bother writing a load of bullshit? No. So I do a bit of reflective writing in the morning. It separates the true from the false, the wheat from the chaff. And through years and years of doing that, stuff comes out onto the page that's not of my limited intellect, yeah? And the inspirational thought and the guidance and the action that I need for that day alone, it just comes out. And then I feel a little bit clearer in my little messy hand, like that. It goes calm for a minute, and then I can get with my breath, and then I can practice my meditation that I do, you know. And I found my way, and it evolves over time. And the inspiration that I need comes because I'm always looking for it, you know. And it's a great journey. And if I'd got to the end point of it, I'd be bored. You know, I always say this, I get bored of people really quickly when I'm using drugs. When I'm untreated alcoholic, I get used people up just like that. You know, as quick as that pipe's done, as quick as that hit's done, that relationship, I'm over it. Yeah? You know, this relationship with God, it just gets better and better. You know, that's priceless. You'll never be able to buy that shit anywhere. You know, if anyone ever tries to sell you it, they are mugging you right off. They are just printing money. You know, this is something that you have to go for yourself. You know, and I spoke for a long time, so I'll leave on this, you know. The right sponsor, if you haven't got a sponsor, you know, or you feel that you're at a place in your program where it's stagnant, it doesn't need to be like that, you know. Keep looking for mentors, keep looking for guidance, because it really is all in that, the 10, 11 and 12. It's just gold dust. You've got to keep digging. The deeper that you dig, the bigger the gems, you know, that come out. And avoid the people that are like parrots. You know, it always says that, you know, if you repeat what other people say, you know, like parrot fashion, like you hear people, they've got a certain sponsor, so they say everything their sponsor says. It's all right to start with, right, because we're learning stuff. That's great. But if you just keep repeating what someone else's experience is, you'll get the experience of a parrot and you'll stay in a cage. You know, you're not going to grow in that place. And it's the same with like, with getting a God of your own understanding, you know. It's like, I always share this because it's my little thing. I came up with it. But I never, ever walked into a crack house or a place where you buy drugs or a bar or wherever you go to get high and gave someone like $100 and said, oh, will you drink this $100 or smoke this $100 so I can watch you getting high and getting your experience? You didn't do that. And you don't do that with God. Yeah? Get your own God. That's what these steps were designed for, so that you can have something intimate and genuine and that grows and grows and grows as you do, you know, that always keeps you interested. It's the difference between intensity and intimacy, right? You know, I had intense relationships with drugs. I had intense relationships with people. They just burn up so quick. They just fizzle out. My relationship with God and the relationship with the people that I love is true intimacy. And there's always more to be revealed. As I seek in myself, I can see that in others. And as I see beauty and love in myself, I can see that in others. So anyway, I spoke for ages and ages. So I'm going to stop now.